Good morning. I'm Mark Blank, and this is the Commissioner's Weekly Meeting for Wednesday, September 25th, 2024. Commissioner Plant, preliminary comments. Are you ready to approve the consent agenda?
I am ready to approve the consent agenda.
Commissioner Goman?
Good morning. I would also approve the consent agenda.
As would I. Proceeding number 24A-0324R. Mr. Farrell, Dr. Fishaber.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Alan Farrell with the Rail Transit Safety Section. I'm here today for any discussion on proceeding numbers 24A-0324R, 24A-0325R, and 24A-0349R, which, if you're ready, I will now address.
Yes, the Rail Division always seemed to present in units of 3, so well done. Thanks for joining the tradition.
Thank you. So in proceedings number 24A and 0324R and 24A-0325R, Colorado Pacific Rio Grande Railroad, LLC, or CXRG, submitted 2 applications to close the crossings at Faraday Street and Franklin Street in the city of Monte Vista. CXRG and Monte Vista are working together to close the 2 at-grade crossings. CXRG desires to eliminate the Faraday Street Railroad at-grade crossing to reduce the risk of incidents and to enhance public safety. Monte Vista desires to eliminate the Franklin Street crossing to incorporate the short section of Franklin Street lying to the north of CXRG main track connecting to US 160 into its existing city park and use that paved area for parking. Closure will involve the removal of the road and passive warning signs at each crossing. At the Franklin Street crossing, Monte Vista will erect a fence along the north side of the railroad roadbed, connecting to existing park fences. There are currently 2 trains per day that use the crossings. At the Faraday Street crossing, which is average daily traffic of 50 vehicles per day, a hazard index analysis, which predicts the probable number of accidents expected to occur in a 5-year time period at a crossing, showed a cumulative reduction in the probable number of accidents at adjacent crossings at Stella Street and Henderson Street, which would carry the additional traffic resulting from the closure of the Faraday Street crossing. The hazard analysis calculations are included in the decision. Similarly, at the Franklin Street crossing, which is average daily traffic of 100 vehicles per day, a hazard index analysis showed a cumulative reduction in the probable number of accidents at adjacent crossings at Lyle Street and Jefferson Street that would carry the additional traffic resulting from the closure of Franklin Street crossing. The hazard analysis calculations are also included in the decision. CXRG estimates the work or the cost of the projects at $5,000 for each crossing and will bear all costs associated with the work. CXRG proposes to start the work for both projects and approval of the applications and anticipates being complete with the work by December 31st, 2024. And there were no interventions filed in either proceeding. And unless you have questions, I have a recommendation for these 2 proceedings.
Nope, if you could give your recommendation, that'd be great.
Staff recommends the Commission deem the applications complete, grant each application, and require CXRG to inform the Commission when each crossing has been closed and require CXRG to file the updated national inventory forms in these proceedings by December 31st, 2024.
Commissioner Plant?
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman?
Thanks, Mr. Farrell. I also agree.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision on this too. Would you like to complete the trinity with 24A-0349R?
Absolutely. In this proceeding, CDOT submitted an application to reconstruct the 2-bridge structure of US 50B over the UPRR track in Pueblo County to accommodate larger traffic volumes at the interchange from southbound I-25 to eastbound US 50B. The proposed overpass structures designated in the project as K18HD and K18HE are designed to clear span the entire railroad corridor. Bridge structure K18HD is proposed to provide a minimum of 23.75 feet clearance from the top of the rail to the bottom of the bridge structure and will provide a minimum of 57.7 feet of horizontal clearance from the center line of the track to the pier of the bridge structure. Bridge structure K18HE is proposed to provide a minimum of 23.9 feet clearance from the top of the rail to the bottom of the bridge structure, and will provide a minimum of 58.42 feet of horizontal clearance from the center line of the track to the pier of the bridge structure. The proposed minimum clearances meet or exceed the minimum requirements found in Rules 7324 and 7325 of the Commission rules. CDOT estimates the cost of the project at $6,575,630. CDOT will cover the cost of this work as part of the CDOT I-25 and US 50B interchange reconstruction project in Pueblo. CDOT proposes to start the reconstruction of both overpass structures on January 6, 2025, and anticipates being complete with the work by December 31st, 2026. And again, there were no interventions filed in this matter. And again, unless you have questions, I have staff recommendation to share.
If you can give your recommendation, that'd be great.
Staff recommends the Commission deem the application complete, grant the application, and require CDOT to inform the Commission when the crossing is complete, and require CDOT to file an updated USDOT crossing inventory form for the crossing in this proceeding by December 31st, 2026.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gutman,
I also agree.
as do I. And again, that can be an ABC decision, deeming the application complete and granting it, and requiring the information to be filed consistent with your recommendation. So thank you, sir. Proceeding number 24M-0329T, Mr. Branson, Ms. McLaughlin, statewide 911 surcharges.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Darrell Branson, Commission Advisory Staff. On July 31st, 2024, the Commission issued an order initiating this proceeding to set certain rates, threshold, and distribution rates for 911 funds to meet the statutory deadline of October 1st, as found in several sections of Title 29, Article 11 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. The order contained initial recommendations from Commission staff regarding the actions that the statute requires. Interested parties were encouraged to submit comments on the initial proposals and/or file interventions. Interventions were received from several parties: the Office of Utility Consumer Advocate, UCA, which filed a notice of intervention as a matter of right, and 3 motions for permissive intervention from Quest Corporation, DBA CenturyLink QC, or CenturyLink, also known as Lumen Technologies, Boulder Regional Emergency Telephone Service Authority, Douglas County Emergency Telephone Service Authority, and El Paso Teller County Emergency Telephone Service Authority, collectively filing as Best 911 Authorities, and Adams County 911 Authority, Arapahoe County 911 Authority, and Jefferson County Emergency Communications Authority, collectively filing as the AAJ authorities. All 3 entities filing a motion for intervention demonstrated a pecuniary or tangible interest in the proceeding that would not otherwise be adequately represented. Comments and/or reply comments were received from CenturyLink, Best 911 Authorities, and AAJ authorities. Additionally, comments were received from the Colorado Council of Authorities, or CCOA, which did not intervene in the proceeding, but whose comments are considered and addressed in the draft decision before you today. I will now discuss the initial proposals, comments received, and the action recommended by advisors for the various rates and distribution formula that are required to be addressed in this proceeding. First, the opening decision proposed a local emergency telephone charge, or ETC, threshold of $2.12 per 911 access connection per month, an increase of 7 cents over this year's threshold. 911 governing bodies have the statutory authority to set their local ETC rates up to the threshold established by the Commission without filing an application. ETC rates above the threshold require an application to be filed with and approved by the Commission prior to taking effect. Statute requires that the Commission consider inflation when setting this threshold annually, which accounts for the proposed 7-cent increase. All of the comments received were either supportive of this proposal or were silent on the issue, so the recommendation is to adopt the threshold of $2.12 for calendar year 2025. Second, the opening decision proposed a state 911 surcharge rate of 9 cents per 911 access connection per month, which would have been an unchanged rate from our current rate of 9 cents. Per statute, the rate must be reasonably calculated to meet the needs of governing bodies to operate the 911 system, And additionally, statute implies that the purpose of the surcharge is to reimburse 911 governing bodies for the cost of purchasing concurrent sessions or lines for delivery of 911 calls from the basic emergency service provider. The proposed rate was calculated to cover the costs paid by local 911 agencies for tariffed services in the basic emergency service tariff, but the Commission also encouraged comments on what other factors should be considered. A number of suggestions were made by commenters, including one, that the Commission should include an additional amount to cover the improvement amount recently approved by the Commission in proceeding 23A-0197T, which the Commission confirmed through its decision last week at a rate of $310.86 per concurrent session per month. Two commenters, CCOA and CenturyLink, suggested an increase of 3 cents to cover this additional amount. Commission rule states that the Commission will consider this approved improvement amount when setting the surcharge rate, so advisors' recommendations will be to adjust the surcharge accordingly in this final decision. CCOA also recommended an additional 2 cents to cover recurring charges that it states that CenturyLink intends to propose through an upcoming tariff filing. That filing had not yet occurred at the time that the comments were filed, but have since been received by the Commission in proceeding number 24AL-0397T. CenturyLink suggested an additional 1 cent be added to the surcharge for the same reason. Commission advisors note that BES tariffs tend to be protested, often by a combination of Commission staff and other stakeholders, and undergo an extensive adjudication. We find it unlikely that the tariff will be effective until well into 2025. We also note that the proposed new rates in the tariff filing won't be mandatory until 12 months after the effective date of the tariff, meaning that they won't likely be mandatory until 2026. We also note that the rates initially proposed by the company in a BES tariff are often modified significantly by the conclusion of the adjudication. For those reasons, advisors do not recommend adjusting the surcharge rate to cover this tariff, but instead consider an adjustment in next year's 911 rate proceeding. Best 911 authorities also suggested that the Commission raise the surcharge by an unspecified amount to set aside funds for use by the 911 service enterprise, which was created by Senate Bill 24-139 and is currently in the process of being seated by the Governor's office. Advisors, however, are unable to determine a legal path for the Commission to collect and set aside funds for the enterprise in the absence of an established 911 enterprise fee, which is to be established by the Enterprise Board after it is seated. Therefore, we advise against making an additional adjustment to for this purpose and suggest that this should be a consideration for the Commission in next year's 911 rate proceeding, rather after the enterprise fee has been established by the enterprise. Taking into account the recently approved improvement amount to be added to the tariff, advisors recommend establishing a state 911 surcharge fee of 12 cents for calendar year 2025. Third, statute prescribes that the Commission will set a per transaction prepaid wireless 911 charge equal to the average of the local emergency telephone charges across the state, plus the state 911 surcharge being adopted for the following year. At the time of the opening of this proceeding, this amounted to a rate of $2.06 per transaction. If the Commission adopts a state 911 surcharge rate of 12 cents, however, this will need to be adjusted to $2.09. This is roughly an 11% increase over the current rate of $1.88. Commenters noted that the additional adjustment to $2.09 is required by statute if the Commission adopts the 12-cent state 911 surcharge rate. Finally, we attach two proposed distribution percentage lists as required by statute, one for the distribution of the state 911 surcharge revenues to local agencies, and one for the distribution of prepaid wireless 911 charge revenues to local agencies. The method for calculating both lists is prescribed in statute, and no commenters challenge the Commission's methodology. We do recommend making one adjustment to the state 911 surcharge distribution list after having been informed that Clear Creek County, which closed its 911 center this year, will no longer maintain its incoming 911 lines, and we will attach the new distributions list to the final decision. So for the reasons discussed today, the draft decision before you would do the following: grant the motions for interventions by all parties and adopt the following rates, thresholds, and distribution schedules effective January 1st, 2025. An ETC threshold rate of $2.12 per 911 access connection per month, a state 911 surcharge rate of 12 cents per 911 access connection per month, a prepaid wireless 911 charge rate of $2.09 per transaction, A distribution schedule for the state 911 surcharges consistent with the attachment provided in the initial order opening the proceeding, with one adjustment to account for the closing of the 911 center in Clear Creek County. And finally, a distribution schedule for the prepaid wireless 911 charge funds consistent with the attachment provided in the initial order opening the proceeding. With that, I will pause for your questions and your vote.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with with your recommendations. I just have one question. In the closure in Clear Creek County, what happens in that case? That gets picked up by another adjacent center, or and they just basically take over that territory? Is that
correct? Clear Creek County entered into an agreement with Jefferson County Communications. So Jefferson County Communications is now taking 911 calls for Clear Creek County.
okay? Yeah, I know they have a lot of activity up at in the gambling towns up there. So, yeah, I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman.
Thanks, Mr. Branson. I also agree with your recommendation.
As do I, and that can be an ABC decision, granting the motions to intervene and adopting the thresholds, rates, and distributions consistent with your recommendation. So thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Let's come back to the Public Service Company ERP last. Go to 24AL-0372E, revising the ECA. Mr. Lugo. Dr. DePio.
Morning, Commissioners. I'm standing in for Mr. Rivera Lugo. This is in the matter of advice letter number 1915, electric, filed by the PSCO, or Public Service Company of Colorado, to update its Colorado PUC number 8, the electric tariff, by revising the ECA, electric commodity adjustment factors, applicable to all electric base rate schedules to be effective October 1st, 2024. So PSCO filed this advice letter application proposing to revise the ECA factors for the fourth quarter of 2024 to be effective from 1st October 2024. The ECA factors will increase from those currently in effect, excluding residential rates, which are decreasing. So as set forth in tariff sheet number 143 and 143A, this advice letter proposes the quarterly ECA factors revision required by the ECA sheet number 143C of the company's electric tariff and commission decision number C091-1446 in proceeding number 09AL-299E, using projected fuel, purchase energy, purchased wheeling expenses, and other commission approved items for the period from October 1st through December 31st of 2024. The electric sales in the fourth quarter of the year, which is used as a denominator in the ECA factor equation, are projected to decrease by 10.4% to 7.317 million kilowatt hour, which is little lower than the previous quarter, which was 8.166 million kilowatt hour, mostly due to the seasonal sales volume estimated going down for the fourth quarter because of winter season. Overall, the projected fuel cost for the fourth quarter of 2024 are $205.5 million versus $217.8 million for the previous quarter, which is a 5.6% decrease due to combination of projected seasonal sales volume, which decreases, and also the projected level of fuel cost mix. The deferred account balances in the ECA calculation also represents an undercollected amount of $26.218 million in the company's books by July 31st of 2024. In accordance with the decision number R240417 in proceeding number 23A-2039E, the 2022 ECA Prudence Review, a credit of $1.5 million to customers is associated with Comanche 3 outage in 22, as well as company-owned solar gardens operated in 22 have been included in this updated ECA deferral balance. Additionally, as indicated in proceeding number 24A dash 0327E, which is 2023 ECA prudence review, the company has included a true-up of carrying cost associated with Cheyenne Ridge DTA during 2023, which shows about 193,000 credit to ratepayers in the updated ECA deferred balance as of July 31st, 2024. Also, as usual, the interest based on the Federal Reserve's published interest rate for 90-day commercial paper was also included in the deferral account balances. The remaining ECA factors formula components other than the energy cost and deferred account balance items as discussed above included a proposed total credit balance of about 37.04 million. Now I'll talk about the system operating reporting provided by PSCo in this advice letter. Q2 of 2024 forecast versus actual results comparison typically highlight the overall fuel and purchase power ECA costs were approximately 13 million more than the forecast, which is a 6.5% increase. PSCo had also forecast generation from system resources would be about 49% renewable in Q2, but actual generation was about 50%. Fossil fuel generation was about 3.3% below the forecast. Now for Q4, the generation forecast includes 9.6 million megawatt hour compared to Q3 generation of 9.5 million megawatt hour. PSCo's projected generation mix for Q4 is about 57% fuel and fossil fuel and 43% renewable. The dispatchable generation forecast indicates no unit level issues and states that there are no significant planned unit outages or constraints that otherwise alter the company's operational assumptions. PSCo also began operating in the SPP Western Energy Interbalance Services market in April last year, and costs and revenues from participation through July 24 are reflected in the ECA's deferred account balances. So I'll talk about the revenue and customer impact balance now. Based on PSCo's computation of ECA factors, will increase 3.7% for the commercial rate, which is from cents to 2.677 per kilowatt hour to a proposed rate of 2.775 per kilowatt hour. If approved, the average commercial customer's monthly bill will increase by less than 1%, 0.73% to be precise. For residential customers, PSCo is requesting a decrease of 0.78% from the current residential rate of 2.662 cents per kilowatt hour to a proposed rate of 2.641 per kilowatt hour. The adjustment will result in a net increase in company's revenue for the period October to December 2024 by 5.546 million. I can pause here for your discussion or present our recommendation.
We'd welcome your recommendation.
Staff has reviewed the advice letter and the accompanying tariffs and the work papers provided to us, and we didn't find any material issues. So staff recommends that Commission takes no further action and allows this advice letter to go into effect by operation of law.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gumman.
I also agree.
As do I. Thank you, Dr. Depew.
Thank you.
Proceeding number 24D0378E. Mr. Acera. I don't even know how to describe this one.
Let me take a shot at it. Good morning, Commissioners. The loan filing in this proceeding is titled as a complaint, and generally complaint proceedings test one individual's facts against our regulations or the law. In this case, the complainant, who is self-represented, asked the Commission to do two things. One, rule on whether the 60-day limit defined in 26-261 paragraph A.5 applies to the interconnection of a DER by a customer-owned meter collar adapter to the electrical grid. And two, the complainant also requests that the commission rule on whether Excel or Public Service Company of Colorado's customer-owned meter collar application process is transparent, timely, and not unduly burdensome when compared to the process defined by San Diego Gas and Electric. Now, neither of those requests are the type of claims that would be heard in a complaint, but they are the type of claims that could be heard in a petition for declaratory order. So my first recommendation for you today, and on which I'd suggest you vote now, is that you construe the filing as a petition for declaratory order before moving on to address the requests.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with that. To changes to a declaratory order complaint.
Not easy for you to say. Commissioner Gilman.
I also agree.
As do I.
So in terms of petitions for declaratory order, the commission, as you all know, entertains them entirely at its discretion under Rule 1304F. And historically, the commission has accepted petitions for DEC orders when there's a real controversy surrounding the application of tariffs or rules or statute. And when that's the case, the commission usually accepts the petition and sets it for notice and either refers it or retains it en banc. So let's turn to the first request in the petition, which is that the commission conclude the 60-day application process for meter collar adapters governs or is the entire process for DER interconnection. I recommend you conclude there's no legal uncertainty on this point. In this case, throughout the filing, the petitioner conflates the DER interconnection process with the separate and much shorter 60-day approval process for customer-owned meter collars. The petitioner accurately quotes the substance of the relevant statute, which we view as 40-2-124, subsection 1C, Roman 2A5, and that section allows customers to purchase their own meter collars, and it also requires utilities to have a 60-day approval process for meter collar applications. And then the petition asserts that this approval process is obviously the DER interconnection process. This is not the case. The quoted language in the petition is from the very lengthy res net metering statute in the section that I cited earlier. Throughout that section, the legislature discusses interconnection standards, and the quoted language provides only for customer ownership and an approval process of meter collars as a subset of interconnection standards. So as a result, there's no legal controversy here. The commission's lengthy interconnection rules, rulemakings, and more importantly, the statute itself indicates that the DER interconnection process is distinct from the meter collar approval process. So I would recommend that you make that filing, and then we can move on, or make that finding, and then we can move on to the second issue.
Commissioner Plant.
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gilman.
I also agree.
As do I.
I also recommend that you decline to take up the second issue the petitioner raises, which is that you conclude Public Service's meter collar approval process does not meet the statutory requirements because San Diego Gas and Electric allegedly has a different approval process that the petitioner asserts is better for a handful of reasons. I recommend that you find an out-of-state regulated utilities approach is no baseline for whether a jurisdictional utility is meeting its relatively straightforward obligations under the law. If the petitioner was asserting that Public Service's approach was unreasonable under Colorado law, that may be something the commission may want to consider depending on what supported that allegation. But here, the statute sets forth a 60-day approval process, and a process that meets that deadline accords with Colorado law. So whether another utility has a quicker approval process doesn't mean Excel's process is contrary to Colorado's law. Moreover, the petition at times appears to conflate interconnection application timelines with meter collar timelines, making it nearly impossible based on the language in the petition to understand why the petitioner thinks Public Service is falling short of its meter collar approval obligations. So on this point, I recommend you conclude the petition has not presented a cognizable controversy about the application of the statute or rules. And given that conclusion, that ultimately you decline to accept the petition.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman,
I also agree.
as do I.
And we can do that as an ABC order if that works for all of you.
It does. Thank you, Mr. Asar.
Yep.
Proceeding number 24L-0389G, Atmos Energy GCA, Mr. Duncan.
Good morning, commissioners. On September 13th, Atmos Energy Company filed their application for their quarterly gas cost adjustment. Overall, they're seeking approximately a $16 million increase. $9.5 million are coming from change in volumetric charges, given that we are entering heating season. And just under $8 million are from change in commodity prices and upstream costs. Ultimately, this is going to lead to a 0.47096 CCF rate in the Northern Colorado Division, or North Colorado as they call it, 0.28721 per CCF rate in the Southeast Colorado Division, and a 0.2990 CCF rate in the Southwest Colorado Division. Are there any questions, or would you like me to get to my recommendation?
If you could get to your recommendation, that'd be great.
Staff has reviewed the filing and has found that it contains all necessary exhibits and recommends that the application be deemed to compete and to grant the application to change the GCA on less than statutory notice.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman,
I also agree.
as do I. And as you say, that can be an ABC decision, deeming the application complete, granting it, and requiring the compliance filing. So thank you, Mr. Duncan. But don't leave yet. We got 24L-0392 steam, the steam cost adjustment.
Alrighty. Similar to the Atmos GCA, September 13th, Public Service Company of Colorado filed quarterly application for their GCA for their SCA, I'm sorry, to adjust the steam costs on less than statutory notice. This is a smaller increase than Atmos is seeing. The net revenue impact is projected to be about an increase of $175,000. Most of the increases appear to be due to increased commodity costs, and they've taken a pretty good chunk out of their deferred costs too. So there's not as many excess dollars in the deferred account to offset the increase in commodity costs. Are there any questions, or would you like me to get to my recommendation?
Now, if you can go to your recommendation, that'd be great.
Staff has reviewed the information provided by the company and recommends that the application be deemed complete, that the application be granted on less than statutory notice, and that the application be granted.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman,
I also agree.
as do I. And again, that can be in ABC order like the last one. So thank you, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you.
Temporary rules regarding implementing Senate Bill 23-291. Ms. Harper, Mr. Davis.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ruthie Harper of your Commission Council. Mr. Davis is also available for any questions. For decision today is whether to reissue the temporary rules implementing certain provisions of Senate Bill 23-291 concerning information to be filed with a rate case, required rate trend reports, and annual reporting relating to costs that are prohibited from utility rates. Last August, the Commission issued temporary rules implementing these changes in law. Since then, the Commission found it necessary to reissue those temporary rules prior to their expiry in March 2024, We are again in that situation as the rulemaking before the ALJ is not yet complete, and the temporary rules will expire on October the 2nd. The ALJ has made good progress. He's held a hearing and solicited several rounds of comment. However, it's not yet reached the point of issuing a recommended decision. So I can proceed to recommendation or answer any questions.
Yeah, if you can give us your recommendation, that'd be great.
In this context, I do recommend adopting temporary rules that mirror the temporary rules currently in effect. Keeping such rules in place will allow utilities to continue to file for necessary changes in rates that comply with the requirements set forth in current law. I therefore recommend finding it is imperatively necessary to adopt temporary rules in order to comply with state law and to provide for the health, safety, and welfare of the public. The rules would be in effect for a maximum of 210 days, but the intent is that they will be soon replaced by rules adopted through the ongoing rulemaking process. Pause here for your vote.
Commissioner Plant, questions,
agree.
comments, or a vote?
Yeah, I just gonna say I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Goman,
Thanks, Ms. Harper. I also agree.
as do I, and that can be an ABC decision, opening a proceeding and issuing temporary rules. So thanks, Ms. Harper. Let's go back to 21A-0141E. Mr. Eden, Ms. McLaughlin.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. I'm Michael Eden with your advisory team, and Commission Counsel Ms. McLaughlin is also available if necessary. So the first matter in this proceeding relates to comments recently submitted by the Office of the Utility Consumer Advocate, or UCA, and I'll tee those up. To begin, as you'll recall, on September 6th, Public Service Company of Colorado filed the CEP delivery motion, in which it argues that geopolitical and market forces require numerous adjustments to the approved Clean Energy Plan, or CEP. Last week, the Commission issued decision number C24-0678, setting a hearing and establishing a procedural schedule to evaluate various issues raised in the CEP delivery motion. Among other things, the procedural schedule requires Public Service to file certain supplemental information by October 4th, sets a deadline of October 11th for intervener responses, and establishes discovery rights for both the company and interveners. The Commission also set a September 23rd deadline for parties to raise procedural concerns, including with respect to the Commission's decision to consider an extension of the Plains End Power Purchase Agreement, or PPA, as part of this proceeding. On September 23rd, UCA filed comments that were joined by Climax Molybdenum Company and supported in part by Colorado Energy Consumers, or CEC. In the comments, UCA addresses both the Plains End PPA extension and the discovery procedures that Commission established. Starting with Plains End, UCA states that it supports including the Plains End PPA extension in this instant proceeding. In addition, UCA recommends that the Commission direct Public Service to investigate whether the company should purchase the Plains End unit, asserting that this could potentially result in savings for consumers. Climax supports UCA statements regarding Plains End, but CEC reserves its position on whether to include Plains End in this proceeding. Regarding the discovery procedures, UCA, as well as Climax and CEC, take issue with the amount of time the Commission allows Public Service to respond to discovery requests. UCA asks that the Commission require Public Service to respond to discovery requests within 5 calendar days, as opposed to the 7 business days the Commission established in the decision. UCA argues that a 7 business day period will not allow interveners to receive discovery responses regarding the company's supplemental information prior to the deadline for intervener responses. So in sum, UCA raises two requests in its comments. 1, directing the company to investigate purchasing the Plains End unit, and 2, shortening the amount of time Public Service has to respond to a discovery request. I have a recommendation on both of these, but I'll pause first for any questions.
I think we'd welcome your recommendation.
Okay. Although it's not technically styled as a motion, advisors recommend the Commission grant UCA's discovery request in part. UCA raises a legitimate argument that a seven business day period will not allow interveners to receive discovery information regarding the company's supplemental information prior to the deadline for intervener responses. For those discovery requests relating to information that is newly disclosed on October 4th, 2024, advisors recommend granting UCA's request and requiring the company to respond within 5 calendar days. However, for discovery requests made prior to October 4th, 2024, or which do not relate to information that is newly disclosed on October 4th, 2024, advisors recommend denying UCA's request and maintaining the 7 business day response period that Public Service initially proposed and which the Commission adopted in decision number C24-0678. As for the Plains End issue, advisors recommend against requiring Public Service to investigate purchasing the unit, but we wouldn't preclude UCA from using the established procedures to investigate and advocate for this approach in this proceeding.
Commissioner Plant,
I agree with the recommendation.
Commissioner Gellman,
I also agree.
as do I.
Thanks. And that's all I had, but I believe, Chair, you had some comments that you wanted to make.
Yeah, so after our deliberations last week, I thought more about our conversation and particularly what Commissioner Gellman said about maintaining competitive tension. I'm also still struggling with a company's proposal that would have an independent auditor in this commission sets project-specific price adjustment, largely in ways that may not produce much competitive tension, and would instead rely on the auditor and a cap to prevent unnecessary price increases. You both shared these concerns last week, and our order already emphasizes our need for responses and information from the company and the parties. While keeping to the timelines we approved last week, with the company filing on October 5th and the other parties on October 11th, I wanted to discuss today asking the company and the parties to comment on a potential alternative approach. Under this alternative, every winning bidder in the approved portfolio, every bidder in the backup list, and every bidder on the supplemental backup pool would have a one-time opportunity to adjust their pricing, say before the end of the year. For those winning bidders in the approved portfolio who are prepared to move forward with their project at the original bid price, we would ask the company to pursue execution of a PPA as quickly as reasonably possible. If bidders have concerns that the company is not engaging in PPA negotiations in a commercially reasonable way, we should encourage them to quickly inform the Commission. I just think we need to get these winning bids under contract and starting construction as soon as reasonably possible. All other bids, including winning bids that requested a higher price, backup bids, and supplemental backup bids, will compete to ensure that customers get the highest value, lowest cost projects, consistent with the general rank ordering approach in Appendix P in the company's Phase 2 filing. Out of this competition, we might develop a revised rank ordering of projects that would fully reflect any requested price increases. As such, the winning bidders from the prior process who are seeking a price increase would not have any presumption that they will win again. Over the weekend, I also went through the pricing and other characteristics of every winning bid in the approved portfolio, the backup bids, the supplemental backup bids, and the bids that can potentially compete in this alternative process. As a general matter, I think the company has created a reasonably deep and diverse pool of solar plus storage, and standalone storage bids to ensure meaningful competitive tension in any rebid process. However, I do have concerns about the depth of the pool of win bids, as we noted in our Phase 2 RRR decision, where we encourage the company, and I'm quoting now, to refresh the backup bid portfolio for wind projects. In a filing made in April 24, however, the company declined to add additional wind backup bids, stating that the remaining wind bids, and I'm quoting again, have a significant step change in cost from the wind bids in the current approved portfolio and backup bid pool. Given the 10 to 12% price increase that the company appears to be requesting for its own wind bids, I'd like to reconsider that outcome and ask the company to examine the wind bids that are not currently included in the backup bid or supplemental backup bid portfolios to see if any of those projects might now be competitive, given the price increase. I'm particularly interested in wind bids 562, 1086, and 265. I'd have the company report back to us as soon as reasonably possible, but no later than through its final filing on October 25th to determine if any additional bidders are interested in competing in an expanded supplemental backup pool. As part of this, the company would be requested to specifically address the viability of wind bids 562, 1086, and 265. On thermal resources, I'm also concerned about the lack of depth in that pool of bidders, and particularly PPA projects. As you noted last week, Commissioner Plant, pursuing PPA gas projects could help avoid future stranded costs being placed on customers. Mr. Eiley's testimony states that the company is already speaking to the developer of bid 384, a PPA project. I'd ask the company to reach out to that bidder and report back to us if that bidder would be willing to submit current bids with updated pricing and timing in, say, 4 different configurations, assuming 1, 2, 3, and 4 CT units. Similarly, I'd like to know about bids 514 and 510, both PPAs. The company states that bid 514 is no longer a viable option to replace the capacity of bid 235. Even if bid 514 cannot by itself replace bid 235, the company argues that it has, and again I'm quoting, a continuing and growing capacity need over the next 5 years or so. So I'd request more analysis to see if bid 235 could help support the company's expected future capacity shortfall. Finally, I'd ask that the company expressly address whether bids 517 and 538, also PPA bids, are available. These appear to be variations of bids that the company already addresses in Mr. Eiley's testimony, but I want to know for sure. For all these thermal-related topics, I direct the company to report back to us as soon as possible, but no later than through its scheduled filings on October 25th. So with these additions to the wind and thermal bid pools, I'd feel good, based on a review of the bid pricing, that we'd have a reasonable pool of bids for each technology, and we'd be treating all bids equitably. Parties may be already pursuing these another option in response to the company's proposal, but I look forward to the parties' responses addressing these concerns and issues. Finally, depending on the comments of the parties and the company, I think this approach of expanding the wind and thermal bid pools and recompeting all projects except for winning bids that stick to their prior pricing has the potential to create meaningful competitive tension in ways that could reduce costs for customers. So with that, I'd like to talk to you both about issuing a follow-up order that seeks additional comment from these parties on this alternative approach, while keeping to the deadlines we set out in last week's decision. So really, just building on what Commissioner Gilman was saying last week about the lack of competitive tension, and seeing if we can deepen the wind and thermal bid pools and sort of recompete these projects in light of whatever price increases they need. And, we'll get party comments and see what they think, and we can go with the company's proposal or go with this, or somebody else may suggest something else that appeals to us. So Commissioner Plant, anywhere you'd like to go?
Yeah, no, I really I like that approach, and I support your proposal. Particularly I like the idea that if you're going to propose a change in your price, that sort of opens things up again and invites, a little bit of competition. I think that gives a real incentive to stick to your price.
Yeah.
And the certainty of your project sort of matches the certainty we have of a price. And if, you know, market conditions are such that people just can't stick to their price, well, it just opens it back up again for that competitive, you know, sort of measure. So I support that. I think that's a good approach, and I also appreciate your evaluation of the various different thermal technologies as well.
Commissioner Gilman, I have to say, this came out of your comments last week, and you know, just tossing it around with what advisors. Anywhere you'd like to go.
No, I appreciate kind of elaborating on that idea and trying to find us a path forward to kind of understand what the process looks like from here in terms of reevaluating, but also identifying, I think, these two key areas in terms of wind and thermal where the options do not look very deep. And I think we've been presented with higher and more concerning cost increases. And both of those combined are a pretty concerning circumstance. So I support your pursuit of the additional information. And look, I don't necessarily fault the bidders for whatever economic circumstances have transpired in that time. I know there were considerable delays in the process, but I think it's very important for us to ensure that we're representing the best interests of the ratepayers. You know, we've embarked on what is now like a 3.5-year process to try to find the most cost-effective and reasonable path forward. And it does little to achieve that end if we, you know, somewhat arbitrarily raise prices on individual bids without having that competitive process be able to follow through to ensure that we really are providing the best value to ratepayers. So unfortunately, the position we're in at this point is trying to cobble that together to ensure that we maintain some of that intent through to the end. So I think you've presented a reasonable path forward for that, and certainly interested to hear from the parties, from folks, how we execute this best. We don't have a lot of time to do it, and I think we need to try to ensure somehow that we bring that competitive tension into this process. So appreciate your recommendation. Yeah, I think reasonable path forward.
Thank you. I guess Commissioner Plant, Commissioner Gilman, you guys okay if we do an ABC order here? I think we're under the gun.
Yep.
Yes.
All right, Mr. Aiden, another tough Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning for you. Any other comments or thoughts besides telling me to go to hell for?
No, not at all. We can definitely issue maybe C decision quickly, addressing the UCA's comments and also putting a finer point on the proposal you laid out today and in your first deliberations, requiring the additional supplemental information regarding the thermal and wind bids, but also reaffirming the deadlines that were established in last week's decision.
Thank you, sir. Greatly appreciate it. Commissioner Plant, any final thing before we adjourn?
Nope. Thank you.
Gilman,
Nothing additional, thanks.
we're adjourned. See you guys next time.